Hello and welcome to our latest episode 4, I think we're up to, of Talking to Introverts, our podcast all about what it's like to be an introvert in this very extrovert world. My name is Sami Blackford and my co-host is...
Hello, everyone. Denise Oliver.
Hello. So in the last couple of episodes, we've been talking about what it is to be an introvert in business. So in episode 2, we talked about general running a business as an introvert. In episode 3, we talked about marketing your business as an introvert. And in this episode, we're going to talk about working with your energy in business. And as Denise mentioned, if you were listening to our last episode, at the end of that episode, how we both, Denise and I, work on a cycle of energy. Now you can do this with following the moon cycle, so the lunar cycle, and also you can do this by following your own internal cycle as a woman, your menstrual cycle. Denise, bring us into this topic.
Hello. I, over the years of everything I've done, all the skill stacking I've done, I've had to come to recognize that as beings on this planet, that everything has a cycle. There are seasons. The planet shows us cycles. The planet's round. It's a circular thing. And to think that we're not part of these cycles, I think is I think you're missing a trick with energy. And so I'm going to say right up front, as a woman, whether you're introvert or extrovert, just take a look at your diary when certainly the moon cycles are, and consider your own cycle. It's just one of those natural things that we can tune into and work out when is a good time to be out there socializing and when is a good time to consider being more looking at ourselves from our own introspective world. Our breathing is cyclical. Our heartbeat is cyclical. We have circadian rhythms. We sleep, we wake, we sleep, we wake, and we eat and play somewhere in all of that. So then to recognize that and go, okay, what else is happening outside of me? We look up into the sky and we see a bright white disc, and then we look up into the sky another time and it's all dark. It's a dark moon. Doesn't mean it's not there. It is. So a few years ago, pre-COVID, Sami started something called House of Vesta, which was a red tent group for women. And there's a back history to Red Tent, which you can look up. We won't go into now. But basically, the Red Tent movement was to do with women, their cycles, and the moon. Now, when I was going to Sami's House of Vesta evenings, you held them on a new moon. And I didn't have my own cycle at that time. I'd had a very early menopause. It was all over and done with by the time I was 42. So I'd stopped considering that there was anything cyclical around being a woman going on for me. Could not have been more wrong. I would turn up to these new moon gatherings and wonder why I was so grumpy, wonder why I really didn't want to connect. And yet I felt I should have been there because this was a group for women by a friend and I was going to support my friend, and I was just quite resentful of it. And I would just attempt to just shrink away because when I opened my mouth, it was all doom and gloom. And at the back of my mind, I'd be like, what is going on with me? Why am I like this now? I was such a troll, just wanted to be in my cave the whole time. And then I started cacao ceremonies, and I would do them on a full moon, like 2 weeks. Yours was 2 weeks, mine was the next 2 weeks, and so on. I was so different. And it wasn't just that I was hosting my own ceremony, I was different. And that's when I began to realize that just because my own cycle as a woman had come to an end didn't mean there were other cycles that I wasn't a part of. So it taught me a lot, that it really did. And I'm very grateful to your initial Red Tent group because it was just such an opening for me to step into something different, to acknowledge something different about myself. So how does that fit in with business?
Well, those two phases that you've mentioned, so like the dark moon, new moon, and the full moon, are the two main, they're like the polar opposites. So like, they're the two extremes of the cycle, shall we say. So if you want to liken the moon cycle to the menstrual cycle, the dark moon is the period, like the first day of the period. Um, and the full moon is the ovulation time. So as a woman, think about how you feel on the first day of your period compared to whether you know you're ovulating or not, how you feel like 2 weeks, say, later. Um, and like you were saying, like on a new moon, you feel grumpy and like no energy and all of that kind of thing. Might think like, oh well, we just write off those days. Um, but it's about connecting with the strengths and the abilities and the certain way that the energies are taking you in different phases of the cycle. So, talk about the new moon. Yeah, you don't want to go out, you don't want to socialize, you're much more focused inward. So great, use that. So it's a great time for self-reflection, for what's the word? Assessing, um, whether that's in business, in life, in relationships, it could be about anything. Whatever is coming through to you most strongly, you can use that assessment, reflection, energy to look at that thing, that part of your life. And so there's the different phases. So there's four main phases. So there's the new moon and the full moon. Between the new moon and the full moon is the waxing moon, so like the growth. And then on the other side, between the full moon and the new moon, is the waning side. So if let's look at it in context of the seasons. So winter is the new moon and the period phase of the menstrual cycle. So if you look at nature, like everything's dead and like there's nothing growing, and I mean this is huge generalization. And everywhere looks bare and barren and all of that kind of stuff.
And it's dark.
Yeah, and it's dark. And yet underneath the ground there will be things happening. It may look like there's nothing going on the external, on the above the ground, but there's all of that. And as a gardener, that's when you nourish your soil. That's when you look back on, so I have an allotment. So that during the winter is when I look back on what grew well last year, and what do I maybe want to take from that to the following year. So it's that reflection assessment time. And then obviously after winter comes spring, so it's new growth. If you look again at nature, there's like lambs in the field, there's playfulness, there's the new shoots of plants coming up, it's all like creativity and newness. And again, that's the same with us. That's in that phase of the moon cycle or the menstrual cycle. That's how we feel. That quite often that is a good time once you've done your assessment and your reflection. That's when you get your new ideas and like you've got these big dreams and goals and all of that you're putting into place. And then as the moon waxes further towards the full moon, or as we get more further towards ovulation, that's like action time. So as we are recording this, we're just after a full moon. And like the last 2 weeks, I have been getting stuff done. It's like I am just like on fire with my to-do lists the last couple of weeks. But I know now that's going to drop off and I'm going to have other things that I'll be doing instead. So yeah, as we get towards the full moon, we're like action, action, action. Full moon is sociable, like because if you think it's like at the ovulation phase of the menstrual cycle, it's when biologically, evolutionarily, it's like the time to go out and make babies, So we're sociable, we're magnetic, we're like, we talk a lot more and all of that kind of stuff. Um, and then as we come out of the full moon and the moon starts to wane, or we start to move from ovulation to back to the period phase, that's where, so you've done all your action, and then it's like the fine tuning. So let's look at biologically again. We were just like at the full moon or ovulation, we were just making babies. Now it's like nesting time. So getting things in place to welcome, I mean, I know it's going to be months later that you're going to welcome this baby, but it's that sort of energy of like getting things in place. What loose ends need tying up, what things need finishing off, and all of that kind of thing. And then we come back down to the reflective phase of like the new moon and all of that kind of stuff. So from a business point of view, you can already see how different parts of your business, how different activities that you do in your business can fit into those different phases. So for me, from a business point of view, the new moon is a write-off. Like, I cross it out of my diary. I do not do anything on that day. Same with the first day of my period. Like, I don't do anything on that day. What I do is journal a lot, look back on what's happened in the previous month, what's working, what's not, what needs changing, and that I use that day for that. Because action is great, but if you're just do without any like reflection on what's actually working, it's like in the last episode when we were talking about social media marketing, and like that's what you're meant to do, but is it actually working for you? You know, so it's, for me as a business owner and just for like a person, living life, it's important for me to have that pause, that, okay, we've just done that whole like month, let's pause, and where do we go from here? And then as we get into the waxing moon, it's the new ideas, it's putting new plans and taking action towards them. So we were talking about this at a recent networking meeting, and I gave the example of, like, say you had a business project. There was one lady who was giving a presentation, and I was saying, okay, let's use that as an example. In the beginning of the waxing moon phase, or just after your period, like, yeah, okay, what do we want to put in this presentation? Let's have ideas where we could go with this presentation. And like, okay, then let's put the script together, let's put the slides together, whatever you've got going on in this presentation. And that's the waxing moon. And then full moon is when you give the presentation, because you're like, look at me, I'm like sociable right now, and all of that kind of thing. And that's where you are more comfortable with being in the spotlight. And then after you've given the presentation, you go into that like analytical, okay, so what worked well, what could have gone better, what would we change for next time? Or if you were given a sales presentation, then it's like the follow-up and all of that kind of stuff. And I really like working with this cycle. It just fits so much better, because if you think of, I will let you speak in a minute, Denise.
I'm enjoying it. Keep going.
I'm just talking. So if you think of the traditional corporate world, shall we say, very much set up for men and men's energy and men's cycle. So men have more of a daily cycle. And it's very linear. So it's like you give out the same level of production like every day. Women are very different. So if there's an interesting graphic I saw, where this is not going to work on audio, but we'll try and describe it, where it compared like women's energy cycle to men's, and men's was like, is it a sine wave where it's just like up and down, very regular. Like the peaks and troughs are quite close together. And then women's were like very like elongated and quite dramatic in like the length and of the peaks and troughs. And like that's across a month. So what men do in a day, energy wise, we do in a month. Um, and like no right or wrong, if it works, what works for men works for men, what works for women works for women. And I think it's allowing ourselves to work with what is naturally inbuilt within us and not having to be the do all day, every day for an entire month. That, like, I've done that in the past with my own businesses in jobs. I've done that where I've had to be like, or made myself be same level of productivity, like day in, day out. And for me personally, and having talked with a lot of other women about this, that's what can lead to burnout for us because we're trying to be, let's say, ovulation, full moon level of energy or level of how we operate
All the
all
time.
month. Yeah.
Yeah. There's two things while you were talking there. One was I don't think women get this about themselves. It's not what we're taught. We learn about menstruation. We learn what that is and that there's an average cycle. Some it's a shorter one, some it's a longer one, that it starts and it'll end at some point. And I think as women, if we get to, whether you're introvert or extrovert, or however you identify, if you get to understand, because even extroverts will have that dip, they will notice that they're not as outgoing as they were. And introverts just get it. We just know it, but we may not have ever identified it and named it as having this cycle of events that happens. So I believe that as women, we are doing ourselves an injustice by not knowing more about this and not then applying it to our lives. As for men, I think, guys, you would have a more interesting relationship with us if you did have more of an understanding of this and that we cannot function like you do. It's just not possible because it's not how we're set up. Now, I'm talking at an average here because there's always extremes either way. And I think that, that any of this that you can get to find out more about, to have an understanding about in the work environment, as well as life environment, home environment, relationship environment with your enjoyable other, that you will just have this energetic connection on a very different level. You'll just know when to approach and when to leave us alone. Because when I was nursing, and I say this all the time, it used to be, I have no idea if it's still like that, I haven't been inside a hospital as a nurse for many years, that in A&E, in casualty, they would increase the staffing numbers on a full moon. This was the time women wanted to engage more, and it was the time that men did too, because women were available. But it would also, in terms of the male, it would be the time that they would come together to fight over the female. So animals do it. We're part of that kingdom. We may have that prefrontal cortex and the thinking brain, but the more natural cycles will take over at times when we just don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. Just look up into the sky. Is there a full moon? Just watch yourselves. Watch yourselves with your alcohol intake. Just watch yourselves with your interactions. And it doesn't all have to be mega testosterone aggressive. It can be way kinder to yourself and gentler, just being aware. And nightclubs used to do the same. They used to have more bouncers on the doors because they could guarantee that there would be trouble on a full moon. Again, I don't know if that still happens. And there was the story, one lady at networking, where she said that her husband used to work in ski resorts and the guys knew when the girls were open for connection, as it were. And it's just like, yeah, it's a very, very natural thing to do. And so when it comes down to our enrichment networking, we look to hold as many of them as we can around a full moon, because as introverts, it's when we are going to be more sociable. As women, it's when we are going to be more sociable. It's a natural thing to do. And we're going to want to have that connection. So why not work with the cycle of the moon, our own cycle, rather than ignore it? It's fascinating that we think we can ignore being part of nature when something like the moon controls the tides of the sea.
I know.
It's 70% water. Why wouldn't it be having an effect on us energetically, just like it does something that's as massive as the seas of this planet? It doesn't make sense to me that you could think that you weren't part of this, but then maybe it's just never been pointed out to you. And so
Yeah,
we're just
yeah.
giving this as information, and it's not right or wrong. You just do with it what works for you at this moment in time.
Mm. I know for me, and maybe for some people listening might be the same, like this was a missing piece for me.
Mm,
And when you were saying about we're not taught this stuff, I remember in when I was in secondary school, when we were, had the like the sex education classes. Yep, we were taught what a period was. We were taught how not to get pregnant.
yeah.
That was pretty much the extent of it. Um, and for a long time, like for years, until like into my adult years, um, I thought you just had a period for a few days once a month. It didn't even enter my head to consider the backstory behind that. Like the rest of, the other 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, whatever it is, you know, in the meantime. Um, and I think a bit of a soapbox moment. I think
Go for it.
sex education in school is doing young women a huge disservice.
But I also think it is young men. I
Yeah.
think that there's a massive lack of information for men out there as well. So you say they have a daily cycle, but they also do respond to the monthly cycle just differently to the way women
Mm,
do. And if they're not understanding, why are they much more aggressive now
yeah.
than they would be for the rest of the month? What is that about? And I think that there's a lack of connection between talking about what happens for a woman, what happens for a man, and how we can then communicate what the difference is. And so one has an understanding of the other. I'm massive about this. I think anything to do with sex education, men and women, it has to be delivered to both exactly
Yeah.
the same information, so that there's less us and them going on,
Yeah.
and we do have that much more of a connection. I don't know how you get that across to the world because there's a lot of men don't care, there's a
Mm,
lot of women don't care, and there's more to it than just a cycle, much more. There's all the psyche of
yeah.
information that we're fed as to what is right and what is wrong. I mean, let's not go down a religion, politics route, but they've got a lot to answer
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Okay, so when is it time to put the soapboxes away and come back to business by the moon?
Right. So soapboxes back in the cupboard. Um, what came into my head when you were talking earlier was like in the last episode when we were talking about marketing and social media as a business. And you were saying that's why we hold our networking groups or as many as possible around the full moon. There's only so many days around the full moon. We can't
Yeah.
hold them all at that time. Um, Also, if you are using social media, around that time is the best time to uh, go live if that's what you do, or record videos, or even not just like visual stuff, but even through typing, because our because we have that magnetism about us. that'll come through in our conversation, and also if we're writing. So it's a great time to also write sales copy for your website, say, like your sales page or whatever, or to write content in general, whether that's for social media, blog posts, wherever it's going to go.
Yeah, on that, it's that whole thing of, if you think about the moon and when it's full, the light that it brings, so it illuminates, doesn't it? And suddenly an idea that we might have had, or something that we journaled about when it was darker, suddenly it's there. That creativity it seems to be way more natural. But if you don't have this understanding of this cycle, you could really berate yourself, put yourself down, almost think you've got imposter syndrome or something when you're attempting to do the same thing and it's the new moon and you just can't get it out. You just can't seem to get the focus. But that's because that's the dark time. How can you write when it's dark? You can't see clearly. So
Yeah.
by learning about the cycle of the moon, by watching it in the sky to start with, get fascinated by it. It is fascinating to both of us. I find that those few days leading into the new moon, the dark moon, my brain shuts down and I don't like it. I don't like the sensation of it. And you made an observation on the last one that you've somehow felt like you were being lazy because you didn't push yourself to do more with your business, but actually you just couldn't
Yeah.
get there.
I knew that anything that I did at the time, I'd have to redo anyway, because it just wouldn't have gone well.
And that doesn't mean that you don't journal stuff or you don't jot something down that you can then grow as the light grows. Because I get to the new moon and no matter what is going on, I end up having to have a nap in the afternoon on the day of the new moon. I feel ill if I don't. I just feel everything closing down. Come the next day, as that tiny slither of light appears in the sky as the moon is changing, suddenly I'm like, oh, the light's coming back. Okay. But I didn't understand that before. So I would attempt to like wade through treacle at a time when wading through treacle just wasn't a good idea. Really just used to push and push and push and push. But I didn't have this understanding.
Yeah.
So, and
And
it,
I
go on, go
I
on.
was I was the same with my period.
Mm,
So I'd like the first day of my period, it's like you just saying, it's like wading through treacle. That is exactly how it feels. Like everything slows down. Sometimes it's like you're in slow motion and you're like, what is going on? This is really weird. But I would like push through. It's like, but I've got so much to do. And now I'm like, actually, it's more beneficial to me and my business if I just rest for the day, maybe 2 days if I'm
yeah.
feeling indulgent. Um, and because I know that anything that I do then, like I just said, will not go well. It will not go the way I want it to go. And it's better to just like a day or two and then come back to it. I was going
And
to
I
say
think
something else
that's
then it's
where
gone.
actually recording what your cycle is like. Don't wait until you're having, say, fertility issues.
Mm,
Record your cycle so that you have an understanding of what it's like for you. Oh, today I just felt really energized and made 10 phone calls and it felt great. And then there's the other side of it where you would be like, why can't I be like that every day? Well, you can't. Some people seem to be able to be like that. I'm not saying that this is a generalized conversation.
hmm
So by tracking your cycle and understanding your mood shifts and changes might just be the thing that changes your life. It
Yeah.
certainly helps business. I have to say, it helps me get a lot more done on those days, which really is almost, well, it's more of the cycle that I get stuff done than not. So we're talking about taking a day whereby I just know there's no point and I have a
Mm,
day. It's not like I'm doing nothing. So I have a day of tidying up and I find things like, oh, I didn't finish that. Okay, that can go on the pile for this next month. And it's stuff like that. And just noting if I'm going to get like really snippy with someone, okay, so don't have an in-depth conversation about something really important because it's not going to go anywhere. Leave it until such
Yeah.
time as you have the brain capacity, because your hormones are flowing nicely, rather than try and push through. Sometimes there is stuff that has to be done. There's no doubt about that. But being aware at the back of your mind that this cycle might just affect how your brain's working, what comes out of your mouth, and how your body feels.
Yeah.
Just be aware of it and mitigate for those circumstances.
Yeah.
Just know that no matter what sort of diet you have, what exercise you do, what supplements you take, there's still a cycle. It's still going to show up. It just is. And yeah, we'd love to. I mean, anyone listening to this who goes, "Oh my God, I so get it," we'd love to hear from you. If you're someone that knows that your cycle is very much governed by the moon in the sky, then let us know, because then, it's not just us talking about this, other women too can connect with this. And guys out there, if you've been aware and noted and recognize that there's a gentler way of connecting, we'd love to hear from you too. So while we're all about the ladies, because we are one each, then it's not about not including the guys. It's just that we're talking to women in a way that we have this desire that they show up to be the best that they can be. And when a woman is doing that, then her enjoyable other gets to have the best of her. So yeah.
Yeah.
Can I
I
get
mean,
back on my soapbox a little bit then?
I think all, well, perhaps not all, but the vast majority of men are involved with a woman in some way, whether it's a mother, a daughter, a sister, a wife, a friend,
A work colleague.
yeah. Um, it would do no harm for men to know this stuff as well.
No, not at all. And especially with this more gender equality stuff as well. The younger generation don't want to be identified as male or female. The they, them that's coming in. I think that there's still going to be a need to, no matter how intellectual these decisions are made, to connect in some way with what you were birthed as, in order to live your best life possible. I really do. So yeah, that's a whole other topic. Blooming heck.
It really is. So what you were saying about, like, we are sharing this as information and sharing our experience of how we feel these different phases of either the menstrual cycle or the lunar cycle. And also, I'm going to say the seasonal cycle as well. Like
Yeah,
in summer, I want to do more stuff outside than and with people than I do in winter.
yeah.
So it's just like the lunar cycle or the month cycle elongated. Yeah, so we're sharing this as information, and we recommend that if you are interested in learning more about this, then track how you are feeling throughout a month or a couple of months. And we've created a simple way for you to do this.
Drum roll, please.
So we've created what we're calling a moon mood tracker. I have to be very careful how I say that, because otherwise it just comes out wrong. Which we will put a link in the description box for where you can go and download that. And it's a really simple circular calendar with, I think it's got 28 days on it. And shows marks the new moon and the full moon and each quarter. You can do it on the lunar cycle, on the moon cycle. You can do it on your menstrual cycle. If you are doing it with your menstrual cycle, just remember that the new moon or the dark moon, I think it's called the dark moon on the sheet, is the first day of your period, and then track from there. And there's a little key on it which has some little faces, and you can color in each one so that and then color in the day of the calendar to match however you're feeling at the time. And if you don't resonate, if you don't connect with the words that we've put on there for the different feelings, completely make it your own. We've designed it as a like a template for you to then go and use it how it works for you. But we share this in all of our networking meetings, and some women have been having some interesting revelations, shall we say, about how when they actually track how they're feeling throughout the month, like you were saying at the very beginning of this episode, Denise, about how you were always feeling grumpy. Like, and then so you might not know from just tracking 1 month, but if you track like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, months in a row, you will start to see patterns on how your energy is working, how you're feeling at different times of the month.
And just like me, if you've gone through your menopause or you're in your perimenopause phase, this can really help you as well, so that you can just see just where you're up to with your mood. Because we lose our period, so we don't really know where we're up to, but the moods will still be there, and the emotion attached to those moods will still be there. So I highly recommend that you do this, so that I tend to track in my own daily diary now rather than on the mood tracker. But the tracker is a great place to start.
Yeah.
And it's just knowing, especially when you're running your own business and you're a solopreneur, as it were, just having that understanding of, if you book a meeting on a new moon, are you actually going to show up as your best self? You might not. It might be unavoidable. You might not have any leeway. But going forward, if you take a look at how you can manage your business and how you can work with it, and being a woman and the moon and the energy of all of that, then I am pretty certain that you will notice that your business will change, because you're tapping into something that is very natural.
Yeah. I was going to say, tracking your energies and your emotions throughout the different months and finding patterns is one thing. And it's like, use that to your benefit. Like, put it
Take
in your
action,
diary.
apply it. Yeah, absolutely. There's just some days that we as individuals just write off, don't we?
Yeah.
We have all the best intentions of doing things and it's not going to happen. And even that's with the simplest of things. So I've learned from my experience is that the day before and the new moon is just tidying up time. And it used to be I felt like I was just procrastinating, and really I should have been focused on my business. But if I do a tidy up, if I clear my office, clean it down, empty the bins, it's like that day or those couple of days, it's not been time wasted. It's just been time regrouping and making different choices in a way I would never have done in the past at all. I just wouldn't.
Yeah. Regrouping is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, it's like it's that whole thing of allowing, for me, by doing something physical, it gives my brain a break from worrying about stuff I'm not doing. And it's almost like meditation, really. It allows information to filter through that I can then use going into the full moon, into the bright moon. And I've learned to really embrace that and appreciate it as part of being a woman, because I think far too much of what happens as a woman to do with our cycle, our periods, our menstruation is so negative. It's portrayed as something terrible and negative, and it's just not okay. In years gone by, women would have got together. I do think this still happens in some cultures, that when it was their period time, they retreated and they came together and they supported each other, because they just knew that women understood women in the way that a man can be gentle and caring, but can he ever truly understand what period pain is like, to have it every month, what to bleed every month is truly like? And so women can come together and actually support each other and make it more fun to be going through that phase, rather than we have to sort of sit in a darkened room feeling miserable and sorry for ourselves. And again, I'm generalizing, because that doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah. I think I think we've given like step one, track your mood and your energy throughout the month, I would say next step is around the either the around the new moon or around your period, the first day of your period, or whenever that comes out in the patterns that you see on your what you've tracked, is like prioritize rest at that time. I would say that was step two. And I think if you are wanting to start applying these, like what you've learned about your energy levels and how it rises and falls, if you want to start applying that to life, I think the first place to do it is around the lowest point of the energy and making time for rest. Because I think even just that, if you like don't do anything with the rest of the cycle or the rest of what you know about your energy and the rest of the cycle, I think even just that will have a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think there's two words there: retreat, rest, and I think the other one is reflect.
Yeah.
I think it's such a good time to do all of that. And there's so many ways you can support yourself doing that. And it is to make space for you is the biggest thing. And it's there's far too many demands put upon us to just always be doing. And you're not being lazy when you're taking care of you, knowing that then this is like a springboard into the rest of the month. It just isn't laziness. If someone's not experiencing what you're experiencing, you're not being lazy. You're just knowing that you need to look after you.
Yeah.
So if anyone needs proof, grab a mood tracker and record what's going on for you and make it a very like black and white thing, because some people that's what they need. They can't do it any other way. Again, not a right or a wrong. And you will know that you're not going mad in any way. You just are being you. I love this mood tracker. I think it's one of the best things that I've ever implemented for myself and my business. I really do, because it just shows me when to take care and when to shrug off the comfort blanket. And that's okay to do that.
Yeah.
I could not imagine record. Well, let's do it. I think we need to record on more of a new moon, see whether we're as chatty as this, whether our brains work in the same way. Because I don't know about you, but brain fog and forgetting things
Yeah.
and walking into a room and wondering where the hell I am happens around a new moon. What am I doing here? Who am I? Yeah.
Yeah, something that really like stands out for me around new moon is like brain fog and the like connection between my brain and my mouth
Yes.
somehow gets cut. It's like what words? What am I saying? What?
And is that a natural thing that the brain and the body are collaborating in doing? We don't want the brain to have to connect to the mouth for you to have to speak, to actually connect with someone else. We want you to be with yourself,
Yeah.
become more introspective. It's time for you to do this. This is when it happens. And I get life happens too. And
Yeah.
it's not as simple as we're talking about it. But if you have just an inkling of information and understanding from this, it might just help you to have those tiny little aha moments of, oh, is it a new moon?
Yeah.
Am I behaving like this because it's a new moon? Don't blame the moon. It's information. Just use it as information, and then what you choose to do with that information is over to you. The moon's not to blame for anything. The moon is the moon. We're to blame for not actually connecting with the energy of it and working with it. Went on the soapbox again then.
Those soapboxes are
There's a lot
in
of them.
yeah, in use a lot on this episode. So are we done?
I think we're
Any
done.
more soapboxes you need to bring out?
Well, I could do, because I worked in sexual health as a nurse, and yeah, I wish I'd had this information then. It would have made working with the clients who came in for their information and advice from a medical perspective, it would have been a very different conversation I would have been having with the women. and with a lot of the very young women as well that came to talk to me. But that's for another day. I won't set off on that track right now. I think we should call it a day and say we are done.
We're done
today.
Then I will remind you, all of our listeners, that you have been listening to Talking to Introverts with myself, Sami Blackford, and my co-host,
Denise Oliver.
And yes, if you are interested in tracking your moon mood, you can get your tracker in the link below this video. And nothing other to say than thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye.